With Easter fast approaching, let's talk about the paganism that has infiltrated Easter. And that's the end of the video. I'm just kidding, but there really isn't anything pagan about Easter. There's a lot of different things that people try to use coincidentally as evidence for certain things, like Easter sounding like Ishtar, and Ishtar definitively was a demon that was worshipped by multiple different societies under multiple different names. But that's just simply not the case for Easter coming into existence. Easter was specifically created to set aside a time that was separate from Passover, that way it wasn't confused and always correlated with Judaism. Do I agree with that? Not necessarily. I think that we should have always kept Resurrection Day, Easter, being linked up with the Passover. That way it's a lot easier for Christians to actually look at this stuff. But I understand why the early church made the distinction, and that's okay. But what about the eggs? The eggs actually came from a Mesopotamian practice that was done by Christians in Mesopotamia who were dyeing the eggs red as representative of Jesus's blood giving new life, and they started giving it to people as gifts, and that tradition spread throughout the world. It didn't have a pagan origin to it that specifically went according to the Mesopotamian Christians. What about the Easter Bunny? I think that the Easter Bunny is pretty dumb, but in Germany and around the 1600s, they created the Easter hare, which was literally just like this cute little thing that would bring presents. It was literally a springtime version of Santa, which any kind of magical, mystical creature, I do not like that being associated with Christian holidays. But nonetheless, it didn't originate from paganism, it originated from Germany, and Germans do some weird stuff. This coming from someone who is about 60% German, I'm allowed to say it. Because there's a lot of people who have that kind of misconception where they think that there's a lot of paganism, and it's because of a lot of stuff going through Easter. And I used to think that there was a lot of paganism involved until I actually looked into it and actually did the research and found that no, there's actually not. Now with Christmas, there's definitely a lot of pagan traditions that have been incorporated into it, but Easter really doesn't have many. We have weird things like the eggs, like the bunny, but those lining up with anything pagan is purely coincidental. It's not rooted in reality, it's rooted in just pure coincidence, and we cannot ever say that correlation is equal to causation. We must always look at it properly and say like, oh yeah, this is similar, but that's just coincidental, because humans will repetitively create the same thing over and over and over. It says in Ecclesiastes that there's nothing new under the sun. But it's just an important distinction to make for all the people around this time of year that are pushing it away because they think it's pagan. Your focus on the paganism aspects of it, be them there or be them not, be them coincidental or whether or not you think that they're like genuinely there, you focusing in on the fact that there's something pagan is taking away from what you should focus on, which is the beautiful resurrection of Jesus, proving that he himself is in fact God. That is what the resurrection proved. Jesus was crucified exclusively because he called himself God and he raised himself from the dead. The Father raised the Son from the dead, proving that he is God. God became a man, dwelt among us. God died because God called himself God, and then God was raised back to life by God. Seems a little tricky unless you have the Trinity beautifully incorporated into that, and the Trinity was not something that was created years after the Bible or hundreds of years or centuries later, any nonsense like that. The Trinity is completely and totally biblical, and every single person who's actually a Christian is a Trinitarian. Regardless of all of that, Jesus is God, and the only way that we can be reconciled to God is through faith in him. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. For by grace have you been saved through faith, and this not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not based on works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, that he has prepared beforehand that we might walk in them. Therefore, we conclude that a man is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. God has saved us by grace alone, through faith alone, which means faith apart from works, but we are saved for works. God saves us to use us to do good things. This is why Jesus says to let your good deeds shine out for the world to see. That way they might glorify your Father who is in heaven. So at this time of year, do not focus on anything besides the gospel. Focus on the beautiful conquering of death that took place whenever Jesus died in our place and he rose from the dead, proving that he is God, proving that death cannot hold him. God bless you guys. Have a beautiful Easter weekend.